like to begin my talks with a little story. A few months ago, I was at an event that was focusing on accessibility, web accessibility. So we were all very interested in disability issues. And we were all having dinner at a very fine restaurant. It was very fun. And during the evening, I had talked many times about what it was to be a disabled person in tech. So everyone knew around the table that I was disabled. At some point in the evening, another woman said that the noise was too much for her to focus on the conversation because we were a lot. And I said, yes, me too. It's hard. And then another woman said, imagine what it would be for a disabled person. Which, to be honest, left me totally without any answer, which does not happen often. I looked at her and I wondered if she was just joking, maybe, or if she was so out of touch that she had forgotten that I was disabled in the 5 minutes between the last time I had talked about it. So I ended up just saying something like, well, but I'm disabled, though, in a very feeble voice that was very annoying to me, because I did not know what to answer. And I realized at this moment that because I don't look disabled, people forget that I am disabled, even in the course of one evening, and that I always have to kind of repeat that I am disabled, say that I am disabled, justify myself about it, which is very tiring. And so I can understand it, because when you see me, you don't think disabled, because I don't really fit into the stereotypes of disability. I don't have a wheelchair, I don't use a cane, I don't have sunglasses or whatever. But the truth is, disability is way more complex than that. And a lot of disability is invisible. So this event was basically my inspiration for this talk. Today you're not going to forget that I am disabled, because I'm going to talk about it a lot. Or at least I hope so. This talk is not about web accessibility. We are not going to talk about our product. It's about how the tech industry can be better at being inclusive of disabled workers in our teams, in our processes. So it's not an accessibility talk, it's a disability talk, which is kind of different. I'm going to talk a lot about my own experience. My experience is not the experience of every disabled person. Disability is very vast. We're going to see that during the talk. So I'm going to probably say stuff that is not true for everyone that has a disability, but I'm going to try to take a step back and also talk of other experiences. So this is me. I am, as you can hear, probably French. French are people that have a lot of stereotypes about them. Some stereotypes are very weird, like we take showers every day. But I try to always remind people of that. But one stereotype that is true about us is that we are not very good at learning languages for some reason. So I'm going to issue a kind of warning. My English is pretty weird, because when I was a teen, I decided I wanted to be fluent. So I learned English with my own method, which was reading Jane Austen and Stephen King and watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So basically, 20 years later, my English is still kind of weird. You can find 90s California slang in it, mixed up with 80th English an 20th century English expression. So be just prepared for that. It's going to happen. The rest of the list is pretty much who I am. I am a diversity and inclusion advocate in tech in particular. I used to be a social worker. I've been in tech only for 4 years, to be honest. I'm disabled and neurodivergent. I'm LGBTQA+. And I'm a pet lover, which has absolutely no relation to this talk, but I like to talk about my pets. And I like to show how cute they are, my 2 dogs. The small one is Truffa, which means truffle. And the big one is Plume, which means feathers. And I'm going to let you bask in the cuteness for a couple of seconds so that I can take a much needed breath. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to participate a little bit in this talk because I don't want to do all the work, basically. Please raise your hand if you are currently working with a disabled person in your team. Nice, okay, thank you. Please raise your hand if you have never worked with someone disabled in your team. Okay, nice. Well, sorry to tell you, but for the people that just raised their hand, probably it's not actually true. 20% of the population is disabled. And of these 20%, 80% have an invisible disability. And most of us don't talk about it because there is a lot of stigma about it. And there is a lot of discrimination. And we just have to hide it. So even if you are not aware that you have worked with a disabled person, chances are you have. I mean, me, I even didn't know I was disabled for years because I had chronic illnesses, but nobody had explained to me that it was a disability. So that's even, we don't even know we are disabled sometimes. What is disability? That's a very good question, and you're going to hate me. I'm very sorry, because I'm going to answer that it can be basically anything. So I can't list to you what is disability, what makes a disabled person. Even if I try to focus only on a kind of disability, like at the beginning of my talk, I told you I was neurodivergent. I'm pretty sure you thought you knew what it meant. You thought, yeah, you had a pretty good image of what I was, except this is what neurodivergent people are. And between someone that has, I don't know, dyslexia, or someone that has, let's say, epilepsy, these are very different, diverse experiences, and you can't exactly put us in the same boxes. So disability is a very vast thing, very hard to define. What I like as a definition is the definition of activists, of people that fight for disabled rights, disability rights. It's the idea that what makes a disability is not what our body can or cannot do, but what the society keep us from doing. Like basically, I'm going to use the wheelchair example because it's the one that speaks to everyone. But if you have a wheelchair in a world where public spaces and personal spaces are accessible to wheelchairs, then it's not a disability anymore, because your life can be lived with autonomy and like anyone else. For example, being nearsighted, like I am, is not really a disability in France these days because we have glasses, we have access to glasses, and so the world is accessible to us again. Tomorrow, you take away my glasses, and me being nearsighted is the worst disability I have, because it impacts my life the most in my daily life. So this is a definition that can be reframed and can be like worked a little bit to be more inclusive, but I think it's a good way of seeing disability. Like, it's not what you can't do, it's what society keeps you from doing. Another thing I want us to know about disability when we begin with this talk is that our representation of disability is not true. It's good. For example, we talk a lot about people using wheelchairs. They are the symbol of disability, but there are only 5% of disabled people that use wheelchairs. So basically, we have to really think how we should see disability. For example, another number that I find is very, very telling is that 57% of disabled people have more than one disability. Sometimes when I talk about my experiences, people look at me and tell me, oh, it's impossible to have so much issues. You're very not lucky. And I'm like, actually, it's the experience of most of disabled people. So that's the kind of stuff I want you to remember about disability. Sorry, I'm going a little bit fast. My asthma is going to be triggered. So if you go out of this talk with 3 things that you have learned, I want it to be these 3 things I'm going to tell you now. I hope you're going to learn more, but these 3 key concepts are for me very important to know, and most people don't know them. So even if you just remember that, it already means that I've done the work I want to do. First one, anyone can be disabled. Once again, 80% of the population that is disabled has an invisible disability. So you have no way of knowing if someone is disabled by just seeing them. Not everyone is born with it. That's something that is hard to understand for a lot of people. Disability is something that can happen at any stage of life, and that can happen to anyone. I'm not trying to tell you, be scared and just you're all going to be disabled at some point. It's not true, but the truth is, most people don't get born with disability. They get their disabilities later in life, which is kind of hard because you have to adapt to new challenges. And lastly, it should be disabilities and not disability. That's what I said just before. Basically, it's not one experience. We are not one type of people. We are a very diverse group of people that live through very different things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself now. When I say it should be disabilities, well, I'm part of the 57% of disabled people that have more than one disability. Basically, I was born with severe asthma. I have chronic migraines, then a couple of other stuff, and a few years ago, 2.5 years ago, I got long COVID. Long COVID is a condition that is the kind of continuation of COVID. Studies show that 10 to 30% of people that have COVID get long COVID. Long COVID is not a respiratory illness. It's mostly neurological illness. So basically, with my long COVID, what do I have? I have Chronic fatigue, which means that at my best, I'm exhausted. I have brain fog, which I have right now, which means that I have cognitive issues, hence my notes, because I can't remember stuff. Sometimes even saying my name is kind of hard. I have a blank on it. So that's something very different from COVID as a respiratory issue. I also have pain everywhere and a couple of other stuff. Long COVID is a very complicated illness because it's kind of new. It's only been like 3 years of us knowing about it, and because symptoms vary a lot from people to people, and also duration. 80% of people that have long COVID stop having it into the 2 years window. That's not my case, and we don't know if I'm going to have it all my life or if it's going to stop at some point. Okay, enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about you. Please raise your hand if you think that people using wheelchairs can and should work in tech. Nice, thank you very much. Okay, now, please keep your hands up if your workplace have no steps or ramps, accessibility around steps. Okay, no small spaces that a wheelchair can't get into. If you're not sure, it's no. Okay. Is everything reachable? Even coffee break stuff and stuff that is not just for work? Oh yes, we have still one hand raised. Nice. Okay, that's already pretty good. Okay, so what I want to ask you now, but don't raise your hands because I know the answer. What we would have to ask ourselves too is, what about the places you eat lunch with your colleagues at? What about the tech events you go to as a team? And when you visit clients, if you do, is it also wheelchair friendly? The issue is, if you agree in theory that wheelchair users should be able to work in tech, but the environment is not wheelchair friendly, then it's still exclusion. It's kind of easy to say, yeah, disabled people should work in tech, but if we don't do the work to make an environment accessible to disabled people, it's only good words. And wheelchair users are only 5% of the disabled population. So for every disability, you'd have to find the needs of the people that have this disability and make a kind of checklist like that, because we don't have the same needs. And so you can't be inclusive of disabled people if you don't do that work, which is a big work. When I got long COVID, I thought I was very lucky because I wasn't in social work anymore, because in social work, being disabled is very, very hard. And I thought, well, I'm a tech worker. All I need is my computer. I can work at any pace. It shouldn't be too much of an impact on my career. What I need as accommodation as a disabled person, it's mostly to be full remote, because just a bus ride will take me the day to recover, so it's not doable. And because I need to be able to just have my moments where I take breaks. And also have kind of, like, let's say, I need my time to not be too rigid, because there are days when I can't work, and days when I can really work a lot. So I can't be a 9 to 5, in a 9 to 5 situation, very rigid, because sometimes at 11 I need to sleep. So basically it doesn't seem too much of an effort to make. I mean, yes, it asks for organization, but I feel like the tech industry is the best to be able to be inclusive of that kind of needs, because, well, we actually work in asynchronous and we work with people around the world all the time, sorry. And so it doesn't make sense that I can be in different time frame that other people also. But the truth is, being disabled has totally, I want to say, killed my career, but it's a little bit too drama to say that. So I'm going to say it was a big obstacle for me, because, well, I was still a junior when I became disabled, or more disabled, let's say. And companies didn't trust me to make my work from home. They didn't trust me to do my work unsupervised most of the time. And so it was just no all the time. And the worst is when I tried to explain that it was because of disability, which should be an argument to make the point, they actually just stopped talking to me. I got ghosted by many, many companies because disability is really not seen as something positive. There is a lot of bias. Most of the time, people think that disabled people are lazy or incompetent or too costly for the company. The idea that disabled people can't work, are not intelligent enough to work, are not competent enough to work, are not able to work, is a ableist bias. Ableism is the idea basically that disabled people are less than valid people, to make it simple. And it can be very, very aggressive, like eugenics, like thinking, for example, that disabled people shouldn't have kids, which is a thought that a lot of people have, actually. But it also can be what we call benevolent, like thinking that you know better than disabled people that what they can do, what they can endure. For example, once I was talking with someone about working on a project with them, and at some point I told them, well, I'm disabled, so it's full remote, and sometimes there are days when I can't work, so I have to be able to shift a little bit my time frame. And suddenly it was all, well, I think this project is going to be too tiring for you. It's going to be too stressful. I don't want us to impact your health wrongly, so we're just going to find someone else. And that was infuriating because I know what I can and can't do. I'm not a child. And if I say I can do something, I'm going to do it. Sometimes in pain, but I'm going to do it. And this person was pretty sure that they were doing me a favor by telling me, no, it's not for you. You don't have to hate disabled people to be ableist. You just have to think that they're not able to understand stuff as you can, or that they are not able to express their needs like you think you know better. So, do disabled people work? Yes, we do. In truth, we have issues with doing it. We are more unemployed than the valid population. Statistics are hard to come by, but most studies show that disabled people are twice as unemployed than valid people. Some disabled people can't work. This is something that we have to remember, and it doesn't mean they are worse than the disabled people that do work. It's just that when you take half a day to take a shower, I'd say you already have a job. It's your disability, so that's okay. But for the disabled people that can and want and need to work, it's very hard to find work. And most of us are on the poorer side of the population. We often end up doing the work that no one wants to do. You're going to tell me, well, there are laws. Disabled people that want to work should be able to find work. There are anti-discrimination laws, not in every country, but in Europe, at least, it's pretty much everywhere. That's true. Even in France, we have quotas, like companies have to have a certain percentage of disabled people in their teams. The truth is, most companies prefer to pay the fine than to have disabled people in their team. Discrimination is very hard to prove, except if the company tell you by email, I don't hire you because you are disabled. Most of the time you can't prove it. So it's very hard to enforce the laws. The laws exist, but they don't really matter. As a little story, when I was a social worker, I did an internship under the Department of Justice. I was helping kids that had issues with the justice. And when I was there was a huge scandal because the Department of Justice had to pay almost 1 million fine because they had close to 0 disabled people in their workforce. They paid the fine, everyone was very scandalized, and everyone forgot about it, and it's still the same. I'm pretty sure, I didn't go and make a stats study, but I'm pretty sure it's still the same thing because the conditions of work for disabled people are not evolving in the right way. Sorry. In reality, when you are disabled, you face discrimination, you face the lack of accessibility. It's all good if a company wants you to work with them, but if nothing is accessible for you, you're not going to last long. And then they will say, well, we did hire disabled some people, but they didn't stay, so it's not our fault, which is also something they do with women. So that's funny when you're a disabled woman. And the lack of representation is an issue too, because it's very hard to help people understand what are your needs and what is your reality if these people are not used to see you in the outside world, which is in fiction or in advertisement, even in slides like that, because you become totally alien and people don't follow what you're talking to them about. In fiction, for example, we have a few characters that use wheelchairs. We have a few autistic representations that is most of the time very poorly done. If you don't know any autistic person, don't trust what you see on television, because it's bullshit most of the time. And that's about all. So now, what about tech? That's what we're here for. It's our industry. As I said, I thought it would be better in tech because we have everything we need to be inclusive of disabled people. But the truth is, and I hope I'm not going to make a scandal right now, don't hate me please, but tech is a very closed-minded culture. I have another session when I talk about how if you don't fit a certain profile, it's very hard to go into tech, but to stay into tech too, because women leave tech a lot. We have stats about that. So tech is a very closed-minded culture, and it's a very valid-oriented culture. Everything we do as teams, like team building, etc., is very oriented towards sports, for example. I've seen many job offer with, on Tuesday we go running. And I'm like, well, no. And I've even seen running interviews for jobs. And I'm like, no, I'd rather die. Also, I could die, so no thank you. So that's an issue because, yeah, you can go running with your team if you want. It's not a problem in itself. But the moment you believe that it's part of your culture or your company culture, and the moment it becomes important when you decide to hire someone, that's discrimination. I am a web developer. Running is not in my work description. I shouldn't have to justify myself about why I don't go running with everyone on Tuesday, or why I can't go on camping expeditions or that kind of stuff. So being fit physically has nothing to do with being a dev, and we have to change this culture because it's very harming of disabled people. Okay, so last survey, I promise. After that, you have nothing to do. Please raise your hand if you think about disabled people when you organize a tech event, which is like meetups or tech events. Okay, I know not everyone organizes tech events, but thank you. Now, what about when you organize a party? Okay. And when you go out with friends? I guess the ones that are raising their hands either have friends that are disabled or are disabled themselves, which makes sense. But the truth is, even with your friends, you don't always know who lives what. My friends know that I am disabled, but sometimes they organize stuff that really don't fit my needs because they forget about it. So we all have to be very mindful of that kind of stuff, because even when we are in a small circle, we don't know everything about everyone. The more inclusive we are, the better it is. Being disabled is very hard on very levels. The worst for me is that it isolates you. It shrinks your world a lot. I can live with pain, I can live with fatigue, I can live with cognitive issues. I deal with that. But losing friends, losing hobbies, losing work, are finding heartbreaking. when we are disabled, even we are with our closest friends, we only share the tip of the iceberg. It's very rare that a disabled person really talk about it fully, because it's a lot, and because most people don't understand what we are living through. For example, today you see me on stage. I'm like badass, all in pink, rocking the bad accent, and you think that I probably have a good handle on my disability, that is manageable. The truth is that it's really not. Each time I do a talk, I have to take a week off afterwards, because I'm going to be like to crash, basically. My body is going to not function for at least a week. And I'm going to go home tonight, probably be crying at some point on my commute to home, because I'm going to have that adrenaline rush that is going to fall down, and my body won't want to work at all. I wish I could teleport, but that's something I can do. So doing talk is something that I do because I believe in what I want to say. I'm not saying all that to you for you to be sad about me. This is a choice that I made. And I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy that NewCrafts took a chance on me, and I'm really happy to be able to make my voice heard. But the truth is, you have no idea what people are living through, even when you see us doing a lot of stuff. But if I have one point to make with my story, is that if someone is able to go through that kind of stuff just to do a talk, believe me that disabled people can work in tech. It's way less tiring than doing a talk today. Okay. So, to finish, promise it's going to end soon. In tech, we have the financial means, we have the money, we have the tech, and our work can be done by disabled people. So I don't understand why we are not the leading industry in inclusivity for disabled people. It makes no sense to me. We have everything to be the example. So if we are not inclusive, it's not by chance, it's a choice. We, as an industry, are choosing to not be inclusive. We are choosing our comfort, or what we are used to, and we choosing all those things over disabled people. And for me, it's not acceptable. So, I want us to be better. I want us to become the model industry of inclusion of disabled people. So, for that, I have 3 steps I want us to follow to be better. First step, you're going to see, is going to be very easy, you'll see. First step, we educate ourselves. We can't be inclusive if we don't understand what disability is. If we still think that disability is just people in wheelchairs, we're going to do a lot of harm. So we have to educate ourselves. And how do we educate ourselves? We listen to people that are concerned. We go find disabled people. We ask them what their needs are, what they can do, what they can't do, what we can do to help them, and we try to educate ourselves about that. Step 2, we change our practices. I'm not saying we have to change everything. I'm just saying we have to be open to change our practices, to be more inclusive. And not okay, so we are hiring a disabled person today, so in 2 years we'll be okay to work with them. No, we have to think about it to be ready to implement it the moment the disabled person comes into the company. Otherwise, the disabled person is going to be too tired by fighting against our processes and will probably go away quit before we are able to really be accessible to them. And finally, well, we hire disabled people. Seems simple enough, except when I'm seeing we hire disabled people, it's not, yeah, we have I don't know, Nicolas that is in a wheelchair. No, it's not having a token. It's really hiring disabled people, and even disabled people with whom it's going to be a little bit hard to find a balance to work with, because they deserve it too. If someone is competent, the company should do what it has to do to be able to work with them. I'm finished. So this is a QR code. If you want to find some resources, it's like a library of articles and organizations that helped me do this talk, helped me educate myself. It's not finished exactly, so come back to that link like in a few weeks. I will have had some stuff. If you want to talk, well, we can talk today, of course. I'm not at the convention tomorrow, so if you want to talk to me